Good afternoon. Welcome to our July monthly policy update. We will get started in just 10 seconds. Just want to make sure people are here. People are filtering in. Thank you for joining us. Congress is going on vacation early, but we're not. We're here. We're doing the work. We're glad to have you here with us. So let's get started. Let me again welcome you to Independent Sector's July monthly policy update. This is the summer of scrutiny for nonprofits. I'm Ben Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations here at IS. If you're joining us for the first time on an Independent Sector webinar, I want to welcome you. Independent Sector is a national membership organization representing a diverse set of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people living in the United States thrive. This is a webinar, so your lines are muted. We'll pause periodically for questions. Please feel free to drop them into the Q&A function at any time. General banter or commentary also welcome in the chat. Before we start, I want to respectfully acknowledge I'm joining you today from Washington, D.C. This is the ancestral home of the Piscataway people. They're still in the area working to reclaim their land and their traditional practices. Also, many of the buildings and places we inhabit in Washington, D.C. were built by enslaved people. Wherever you are joining us from today, I want to welcome you. I am joined today by our trusted partner, Wes Coulomb at Washington Counsel Ernst & Young. We are going to dive in to some of the, seems like extra scrutiny that the nonprofit sector is getting from Capitol Hill and from presidential campaigns lately. But before we do that, we want to make sure to set the table about a very important time in the congressional calendar for federal spending decisions and for tax policy. So again, I want to welcome and thank Wes Coulomb for being with us. Wes, could you please give us a lay of the land on appropriations and on tax policy at this moment?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and good to be with you this afternoon. I'll kind of kick it off and start on the tax front. Not a whole lot to report on the tax front these days in Congress. As you know, the House is leaving town today for their August recess, leaving a week early, and won't come back until September 9th, I think. The Senate will be in next week for more a week, and then out for the month of August, and coming back also in early September for a sprint. The fiscal year deadline, September 30th, to get the appropriations bills done. So on the tax front, there's really not a lot happening. There was, as you know, a bill passed out of the House to extend some business tax provisions and also expand the child tax credit that passed the House on a bipartisan basis. There was also bipartisan calls in the Senate to bring it up, but the Republicans in the Senate have opposed bringing that bill up without additional changes. There's been some moderate Democrats, so those Democrats up for re-election in the Senate, pushing Senator Schumer to call up the bill for a vote, but it looks like that's not going to happen before they leave town next week. So on the tax front, both that bill and then also a bill that passed piece was taken out of the House, passed bill dealing with disaster relief for wildfires and the trail derailment in Ohio that also passed the House separately. So it looks like neither bill is going to see action or consideration in the Senate before they leave the August break. So really, on the tax front, it's all really focused on looking ahead to 2025. They have the House Ways and Means Republicans doing their 10 tax teams. They're continuing doing meetings with stakeholders, field hearings, etc., on that issue to kind of gear up for 2025. Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats are doing some of their own individual meetings, not necessarily similar to what the House is doing, but also behind the scenes conversations taking place amongst themselves, with staff, with stakeholders, on and off the Hill and around town, in the business community and other groups as well. So lots of focus on the tax front, really focused on next year and the big tax bill they're going to be doing in 2025. On the appropriations front, definitely a lot of action taking place, as we know, as they try to get things done by September 30th deadline. The House has passed 5 appropriations bills. They tried to do more this week, but got stymied. They're only able to pass 5 of their appropriations bills thus far out of the full House. So 7 bills still remain to be done when they come back in September. The Senate has not passed any bills out of the full Senate, but they have passed, I think, 7 bills out of the Senate Appropriations Committee and have scheduled 5 more bills to be passed out of the Appropriations Committee next week, including the Defense Appropriations bills, which has additional funds in that bill, plus up that would maybe get some Republicans to support the package out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So we could have a situation where the Senate Appropriations Committee has passed all their bills out of the committee by the end of next week, none on the Senate floor, and the House having only passed 5 of their bills through the full House process. And so it kind of sets up a September sprint, if you will, try to get some of those bills done by September 30th. Obviously, given the delay in getting these bills done and how far behind they are, it's very likely and almost assured they're going to have a CR, continuing resolution to fund the federal government beyond September 30th. They're probably likely that in the past into November and past the election. In the past, they've done it, a week or 2 at a time, but sometimes they just do it, a full 2 months to get them past the election, to realizing they're not going to get them all done, or most of them done in the short term. So we'll see if they can produce in September, maybe a ledge branch bill or military construction bill or ag or something that has bipartisan support through the process. But my guess is they're going to have to do a CR for most, if not all, the appropriations bills beyond September 30th into the fall, and kind of gear up for a end of the year conversation around appropriations like we've had in the past, where that happens in November or possibly into December as we approach the year-end conversation. So that's kind of where things sit. Thinking about holistically, most of the bills in the Senate appropriations process have been bipartisan, and then all of the bills out of the House have been partisan, meaning that mostly, if not all, Republicans have voted for those bills without Democrat support. So obviously a lot to reconcile, if you will, on the spending front, given the differences between the House and Senate on appropriations numbers individually, and also overall budget caps and spending as they negotiate the final packages later this fall. So kind of happy to answer any questions, kind of stop there on the update.
Thank you, Wes. So I will again invite folks to submit questions through the Q&A. If you only find the chat and submit it there, we will probably find that as well. Wes, it's interesting to hear you note that Senate Appropriations has scheduled the other 5 bills for next week. That's certainly encouraging. I don't know how today's markups have been, but I saw that the other bills that have passed the Senate Appropriations Committee, did they pass unanimously? That was rather noteworthy to me compared to how the House of Representatives, maybe historically, but certainly this year has done business.
Yeah, I think all the Senate bills have been 27-0 in the full committee. Ledge branch, agriculture, I think what else? Military construction, right? And so we'll see what happens next week as they finish them up. If they, labor, HHS, State Department, they, a little more controversy with some of those bills, some of the policy issues, but we'll see how those play out. But thus far, they've all been bipartisan in the Senate.
And we have a question about which bills passed the House of Representatives so far. And those are the defense bill, energy and water. Though energy and water failed. Homeland Security, Interior, ledge branch, state and foreign ops, military construction, and state and foreign ops. Right. Yep. So legislative branch failed.
Correct. There's an issue with the congressional pay raise that derailed that bill on the House floor. Yep. So those 5 you mentioned: Interior, EPA, Milcon, VA, Defense, Homeland Security, and state and foreign ops. So the 5 bills that have passed the House thus far.
Share a table for people who may not have written all that.
Yeah, good.
Other questions that people have about the appropriations process at the moment? I have a question from Margaret about, can we find and attend Ways and Means community meetings or listening tours? I know there have been some, right? Ways and Means in particular has done some field hearings, which are open to the public.
Yep.
Wes, do you want to talk a little bit more about kind of what other ways Ways and Means is gathering input?
Yeah, so good question. So the tax teams are Republican only groups, and so it's not bipartisan. So they're not doing full committee hearings, if you will, like they traditionally do. So if it is a official committee hearing or subcommittee hearing or field hearing, if they have, those are all open to the public and available for viewing on the Ways and Means Committee website with the testimony and a video of the hearing event itself. The tax teams, they've been more behind closed doors, invitations to small groups come in and talk about different issues. There is a public portal that Ways and Means has announced that you can submit written comments to those tax teams, and that portal is available on the Ways and Means Committee website to submit your comments in written form. And those are due by October 15th. Unclear exactly how they would produce some sort of results of these meetings and the comments they receive after October 15th. I think it's going to be up to the individual, 10 tax teams to figure out what they want to do, the chairs and the co-chairs, if they want to produce a report or a compilation of the comments, that sort of thing. So it's still kind of a little up in the air about what the final product is going to be after October, but they have an open, portal available for folks to weigh in with comments between now and October 15th to those tax teams.
Thank you, Wes. And there is, I don't see future field hearings scheduled, but Margaret, I believe Margaret's based in Kansas City, so it's a short drive from there down to the 8th Congressional District of Missouri, if you can get the chairman to schedule a hearing. That's certainly, we note a remarkable similarity between the locations of those hearings and the districts represented by the majority on the Ways and Means Committee.
That's right.
So there's another question from Bertrand about the sort of more nonprofit specific stuff, which we will get to now, barring other questions. Great. So we will loop back one more time for questions. So the month of July has been quite active on the the front of nonprofit scrutiny. So let's start on July 9th, when the House Ways and Means Committee considered 3 bills and a resolution, but we'll focus on 2 of the bills today. Bills in particular which could threaten the tax-exempt status and the endowment tax calculation of universities in certain instances. So the first bill that the Ways and Means Committee advanced earlier this month is called the University Accountability Act. And this legislation would levy financial penalties of $100,000, at least $100,000 against schools that have a civil judgment entered against them by a federal court for violating students' civil rights. Interestingly, after 3 violations, these bills would require the IRS to review the tax-exempt status of that college or university for possible revocation. So we're certainly not in the business of being in favor of civil rights violations. That is notable to independent sector that this is one more example of legislators, in this case, the Ways and Means Committee, using organizations' tax-exempt status as a lever to push other policy priorities. The other bill that the Ways and Means Committee passed on July 9th is called the Protecting American Students Act. It's introduced by Congressman Ferguson of Georgia. And this is a bill that would amend the scope of the endowment tax calculation. As you will remember, universities need to use a calculation about what their endowment is divided by the number of students they serve to determine whether they owe the 1.4% excise tax on endowment earnings. And so this bill would essentially change that calculation to include fewer students. It would exclude students who are in the United States on a valid F1 student visa, and it would exclude DACA recipients, right? People who are not citizens were brought to the United States as children. So it would subject more universities to this tax. It would make it harder for universities to avoid the tax. And according to Democrats on the committee, it would encourage universities or discourage universities from accepting foreign students and DACA recipients. Both of these bills passed the Ways and Means Committee with a partisan vote. The next day, the chairman of the committee joined other chairmen in sending a letter to the Department of Justice about a tax-exempt organization, the Palestine Chronicle, urging DOJ to investigate and to take action against that tax-exempt organization that these legislators have strong objections to. Again, not being an expert on that issue, there certainly seem to be some credible allegations about activities there. It's one more example of nonprofit scrutiny. The next thing that happened in July in the summer of scrutiny was another letter, this time sent by Chairman Smith of the Ways and Means Committee to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, noting that it is receiving funding from an organization called the Tides Foundation, which funds liberal groups and has been associated with some of the anti-Israel protests as well. And then the following day, on July 23rd, the Ways and Means Committee held a hearing tracing the flow of tax-exempt dollars to anti-Semitism was part of the title, included academic experts on anti-Semitism and someone from the Anti-Defamation League, all casting further scrutiny about how tax-exempt dollars are being used to pursue aims that the chairman of the committee and that others have deep concerns about. So plenty of people watching out on the nonprofit sector this month. And that's just within one committee in Congress. I think that the real cherry on top, I promise you, we had already written the Summer of Scrutiny tagline, and then Senator J.D. Vance got announced as the vice presidential slot on the Trump ticket. Senator Vance, during his short time in the Senate, has made comments attacking foundation and university endowments, and has even introduced legislation that would dramatically increase that university excise tax that we talked about, more than 20 times. It would increase that for schools with large endowments. So lots going on that front. That's probably more than Bertrand was asking for in his question, but there's a lot there. So why don't I pause for anything else that Wes wants to add on that front, or other questions about some of the scrutiny that the nonprofit sector has been facing just in the month of July.
That was a good summary, Ben, and I think your tagline of the summer of scrutiny is right, and I think we should not rest. I think it's only going to be the summer. It's going to continue into the fall, into obviously next year in 2025 as they actually do a large tax bill, and some of these policy issues and these issues kind of resurface again during that conversation, right? Something that kind of strikes me during these hearings and conversations was the nature of the questioning and the themes about, oh, you have a tax exempt status, it's really special, you deserve it, you got to do lots of, you got to do a lot of things to prove that you deserve that tax exempt status, right? And so there's a little more scrutiny taking place in this environment, and so we need to be prepared for more of that to come into the fall and really into next year as they actually put the tax bill together. Obviously, we'll have to see who is going to be the chairman of the Ways and Means and the Senate Finance Committee next year, and who's going to be in the White House will actually make a big difference on the direction they take. But I think these issues are going to continue to surface going forward.
Thank you, Wes. And we have a chat about federal grants being required to look at the whole organization when considering grant proposals. There may be more on this, Bertrand, but the House's labor HHS appropriations bill, which is where the Institute of Museum and Library Services, as every American knows, is funded in that piece of legislation. And there is language in that section of the bill directing IMLS to scrutinize the activities of the entire organization, the entire museum or library or other organization when awarding a grant, and not just to scrutinize what the money will be used for. We see this as a pretty clear marker that the staff who wrote this language are want to be able to come back and scrutinize grantee organizations that do something throughout the course of the year that they might disagree with. We saw a lot of Republican scrutiny and objections to earmarks and community projects during this year and previous year appropriations processes, when those organizations maybe they were a health organization and they were involved in reproductive care, or they were, had LGBTQ programming or things along those lines. We certainly interpret this as laying down a marker that Congress is watching if you're going to receive federal funding. We'll see. That language, to my knowledge, is specific to IMLS, although it was, you could say that some of that concern is what led to all nonprofits being excluded from economic development grants, earmarks through HUD in the House of Representatives this year. So that line of scrutiny is certainly having impacts. Pause one more time for other questions. Final questions. As we noted, the Senate is around next week. The House of Representatives was supposed to be around next week. They were also supposed to pass a number of appropriations bills this week that they did not do. So Congress is heading out to recess. We're gonna be working and finding some time to rest in the month of August. This particular program will take a break in August, and we will look forward to seeing many of you back here for our September monthly policy update. And we know that you have ways to get in touch with us, and we encourage you to do so in the meantime. We have one final question from Paula about what will happen with AmeriCorps. And for context, AmeriCorps was awarded a more than 50% cut in the House Labor HHS appropriations bill. We haven't seen the Senate bill yet, but we certainly don't expect any anything approaching that magnitude in the Senate, where they are writing those bills on a bipartisan basis. We'll see. I think that, with any particular account, it's hard for me to imagine anything like AmeriCorps getting cut that significantly this cycle, even regardless of what happens in the election. But as Wes alluded to, appropriations decisions are going to be significantly impacted by the election, not just the timing, but the content. And so we will see. I know that a number of folks, including us, were part of an AmeriCorps Day of Action on social media yesterday. So thanks to our friends at throughout the service community for that. We'll keep up the drumbeat on that issue, and lots of other sector priorities still to be determined. So Paula snuck in one final question. And final it was. I want to again thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Looking forward to seeing you back here in September, and many of you in between. Wes, thanks again. Wes is just back from vacation. He couldn't wait to get here with us today. So thanks again.
You bet. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks all. Talk soon.